everybody, welcome to White Light. Today our favorite poet to be here with us is Ananya Garg. Hi Ananya, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good too. Are you excited about this chat?
Yes, I'm very excited.
Well, I'm excited too, and we all are eager to know about you and your artwork.
Yeah.
So, your artwork is poetry, right?
Yes, I'm a poet. I write prose as well, but mainly I'm into poetry.
Wow, that's wonderful. So, to get us started, what is poetry to you?
Poetry is a form of expressing yourself whenever you're feeling down, and every person has a different way of expressing themselves. But for me and for a lot of other people, they find it like the best way to express themselves is through poetry. So that's what it is. It's a form of art, of course, but along with that, it's also a way to express yourself.
Wow, that's really wonderful. That's nice. And who doesn't love to express themselves to the world?
Yes.
So, why poetry?
Huh?
Why poetry?
Poetry because when I sit down and when I write, the words just flow out, and I find it like it's easy to just sit down with yourself and just start writing. It's the best way to express it. And poetry, to some extent, requires you to have a certain vocabulary, requires you to have certain like the rules of poetry, the certain principles, and if you know them, then it becomes really easy to just fall into the whole thing of poetry.
Wow, that's really wonderful. So, what entails your style?
My style, it's mostly spoken word.
Yeah.
I'm more into spoken word poetry. I also have an account, and other than that, I've also taken part in a lot of competitions. So poetry doesn't necessarily have to be rhyming all the time. You
Yeah.
can uh, you can have poetry in other forms as well, and I believe in that, and that's a reason I mostly write spoken word poetries, and I also recite spoken word poetries. Uh, in the end, they are what help you to express yourself.
Yeah.
The typical poetry which we read in schools, that the classic poetry, that is also very it's a very beautiful form of poetry, but it
Yeah.
tends to get a little monotonous sometimes, and I'm glad these new styles have been brought up.
Yeah, wow, that's wonderful. So, I wanted to know why not the other forms of the poetry, like slam poetry?
Slam poetry is to some extent a prerequisite of spoken word poetry.
Yeah.
Other all forms of poetry equally help anyone to express themselves, but spoken word poetry helps you to like when you recite spoken word poetry, your
Yeah.
feelings get to play. And when you say normal poetry, it's more for the reading purpose. It's something you would read before you go to bed, or before you when you're feeling lonely. That's when you read the regular form of poetry. And spoken word poetry is something you will say, something you will want to recite when you're expressing yourself.
Yeah, so spoken word poetry helps you a lot to express yourself and what you're trying to say.
Yes, it helps
So,
in that.
yeah, so what are the particulars of your poetry?
Particulars as in?
As in something that is very particular in your poetry, something that is always there in your poetry that helps you get going.
Right. Something that's always there in my poetry has to be use of new words, and that's something a lot of people, they tend to keep their poetry simple, and simple poetry is indeed the best sort of poetry.
Yeah.
But I always try to look for new words, and when you put those new words in your poetry, they tend to bring in that extra effect which sometimes
Yeah.
the other poetry may lack. But yeah.
That's really wonderful. So, why does poetry speak about your art?
Poetry speaks a lot about someone's art. Poetry is a dead art, actually. A lot of people have forgotten that poetry once used to be for everyone, and nowadays poetry is just go in the back seat and people focus more on the other forms of art. So to
Yeah.
bring back that momentum, to popularize poetry, it's important to have more poets, more artists, to raise awareness about this particular art.
Yeah. No, that's really wonderful, and we love how you're bringing poetry back. We should really appreciate the dead art. So, who are your favorite poets?
Amrita Pritam is one of my
Wow.
favorite poets. Uh, I'm sure everyone's aware about what went down in her love
Yeah.
story and the entire concept that happened there. Other than
Yeah.
that, currently my favorite spoken word artists are Priya Malik and Heli Shah. They are the more modern ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are mostly into like speaking and performing.
Yeah.
Another thing I really like about spoken word poetry is how there's an element of drama to it. You can
Yeah.
perform. It's more like a performance and less like a recitation. And I think that's really major because um, a few days back I was watching this video which basically was explaining the difference between an open mic, a spoken word poetry, and it was really intriguing to see how she had explained it. So it was a video by Priya Malik,
Yeah.
and she said that spoken word is a performance. There's music, there's drama, and there's your words, there's poetry. So it brings that level of professionalism and
Well, I
the
listen to a lot more about Priya Malik, and I absolutely love her. The way she
yeah,
just expresses herself. She's my absolute favorite poet, I've got to say.
yes,
And you are also my favorite poet.
how sweet. I've
So,
not been, yeah.
what made you come to the artwork, which was poetry?
Okay, so currently I'm 17 years old, okay? And
Yeah.
a few months back, like I just finished my 12th board exam. So a few months back, when I used to keep on studying, when I used to get free time, I used to write. And it wasn't necessarily poetry, but I used to start writing. And that's when I started watching Anirez and Priya Malik's
Yeah.
poetry. I always knew I had a knack of writing and performing, but I think this little hobby cultivated into something more serious during the lockdown period.
Yeah. No, that really lockdown actually helped people like to focus more on their creativity and their hobbies, which they love. And I
Yes,
absolutely love that.
yeah, I think it's a great time to just follow
Yeah.
your passion and
Yeah.
discover what you're good at.
It is a really great time. So,
Yeah.
lastly but not least, what do you think about the White platform?
I think it's an amazing platform. The fact that you're bringing together artists and emerging artists, for that matter, from all over the world is commendable. I mean,
Thank you so much.
it's really amazing how you're giving them an opportunity, because I have experienced this myself. A lot of time, newer artists, they don't get a platform. They either have to pay something, or they either have to,
Yeah.
get recognized somewhere else to reach to a larger audience. But the fact that you're helping other smaller and newer artists out is just amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ananya. Your words mean a lot to me. And we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the art and the artists. We are an art enthusiast and we love to respect art.
Yes, I can see that from your account. It's beautiful, and it's beautiful whatever you guys are doing right now.
Thank you
Comment.
so much. Thank you so much. So now, as we come to an end of the Vibe Light chat, what is the one thing you would like to say to all of the emerging artists or poets all around the world?
One thing I would like to say is put yourself out there and keep trying, because if you don't put your art out there, people won't recognize you. If you want other artists to approach you for collaborations, if you want other artists to ask you and collaborate with you, you have to put yourself out there. And there will be times where you get demotivated because you'll face rejections. I have faced so many rejections at competitions I did not get selected in, but you have to like keep trying, just keep moving on, and that way there will come a point where all your hard work will pay off.
That is really nice. That was really wonderful. Those were such inspiring words. Thank you so much, Ananya, for coming on with us on Vibe Life today. We
Thank
are really happy that we learned more about you and more about your artwork. It was really awesome. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Do be tuned for more. Until then, do subscribe to the Vibe YouTube channel and do follow the Vibe page on Instagram and Facebook. And until then, keep vibing. You also, Ananya, do keep vibing.
thank you for having me.
Thank you. It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure. Thank you.